Good writing is about having a perspective. Great writing is about taking a journey that shows how that perspective can change. That's why I think the word journalism has journey in the heart of it. Some sort of transformation has got to occur in order for a story to be meaningful. Our next guest is somebody who has a perspective and a willingness to change that perspective that is informed by their tenure as a writer and publisher of one of the greatest magazines that I've ever known, Spin Magazine. And it's actually special to me because my wife and I, we work together at Spin Magazine, and we kind of have held it in a bit of an ideal of a way for great writers to participate in culture, not on the sidelines, but in the center of it, whether through mischief or disagreement or a sense of purpose. What I want you to listen for in this perspective from our next guest, Bob Guccione Jr., is his perspective on the importance of knowing how to disagree, how to debate, how to be in the discourse of what it is that is shaping our culture. Because the 90s, when spin was in its absolute prime, the state of discourse was so remarkably different than it is today. And we're in a moment right now where the nostalgia cycle has us looking back at some of the treasures from that decade. And there is just an enormous amount of treasures kept in the chest of what we call Spin Magazine. Drop into this conversation, spend some time with Bob. I know you're going to enjoy it. Which way is north? How do you want to be referred to in this conversation?
Oh, by my name, Bob Guccione Jr.
Okay, tell us a little bit about who Bob Guccione Jr. is.
How much tape do you have? He says, dating himself. I am a publisher, editor. First of all, I'm a writer, but natural avoidance of writing led me to do something that meant there was no time to write. So I created magazines my whole career and still wound up writing. So I've given in, except I'm a writer. I'm the son of a very famous publisher, Bob Guccione Sr., who started Penthouse Magazine and Omni, amongst others. He was a man I loved greatly, admired greatly, and fought with greatly. And all those things, I think, marked our relationship, defined it, and also who we were as people. And, you know, it's been a fantastic life for 69 years and 10 months, you know. So much of it has been full of wonderfulness, and so much of it has been full of problems and badness and sadness. So I would say I'm pretty much a person who's managed to almost make it to 70 years. Hopefully I get there and another 30 beyond. But that's who I am, you know, just a person who's, I like to use the phrase, living the life God gave us. When we buried my father, the priest asked me to say a few words. I told him I wanted to. And I got up, and the first thing that came to me, and I'd not thought of anything to say at all, because I wanted it to be natural. And I said, my dad lived the life God gave him. And in that one sentence, I think I took away all of the tendency and likelihood of judgment. He was a man many people loved, a man who many people hated, a man who millions of people were polarized over, who didn't know him, but looked only at his image. There were people who thought he was a vile pornographer. There were other people who thought he was an absolute visionary. I believe he was an absolute visionary. Not a perfect man. Our relationship was not perfect, but he lived the life God gave him. From that moment on, I thought, well, so am I, so are all of us. You know, we may not even be aware of it. And we may not be particularly energetically living at the points, and we may not even be particularly smartly living at the points. And we may at other times be defying and defiling our gifts and our graces, but we are still living it. And that's it. And we can only be what we are. You know, we can from that nucleus, we can improve or we can dilapidate, but we can only be what we are. And so some of us have certain parts in the mosaic, and some have others.
There are a couple of words you used in there that describe labels for identities that I want to ask you a little bit more about. One you used to describe yourself, one you used to describe your father. It was writer and visionary. And
Hmm.
something that's kind of shared between those two is I feel like those are identities that people often seek but are afraid to give themselves. And so I want to ask you on both counts, what does it mean to be a writer and what does it mean to be a visionary?
Wow. Well, I think it means to be a writer that you write. And that's first and foremost utterly important. It is not whether you write badly or fantastically, it's whether you write. You can't be a writer if you don't sit down and write. You can be a thinker, you can be a fantasist,
Ah, yeah.
but you can't be a writer unless you write. And it's something I spent most of my adult life avoiding. I actually wrote phenomenally and, voluminously as a child. But once I got to anywhere approaching adulthood and possible professional status, I clammed up for about 50 years. And I wrote against my will, as it were, only when I was on deadline from one of my magazines. But I have since, in the last 10 years at least, reveled in that gift and used it to explore the human experience as much as possible. And I do write. I physically put words on paper and the screen, so I can say I'm a writer. I'm a hopefully ever improving writer, and I'm desperately aware of my shortcomings as a writer. But at least I do it. My father was a visionary because he saw things ahead of time, and I I don't want to call myself a visionary. I would feel uncomfortable calling myself one. But I had a vision also with spin that Rolling Stone had reached an apex and no longer was relevant to its audience. And I started a magazine in 1985 that was relevant to my age group and younger. And I think my father had that in spades. He had a revelation that if Playboy was the highest selling men's magazine in England and it was an import, that didn't even bother to translate into English. I was he said, "Well, I can do that, and I can put it in English." Of course, his magazine was a far greater success, and grew, and then came to America and beat Playboy in America. So he was a visionary because he not only saw an opportunity, but moreover, he imagined a world, which Penthouse was in a way, of great, swirling and competing and conflicting and controversial opinions and ideas, some of which was the photography of naked women that was, the center of Penthouse. And some of it was the great writers he published, and some of it was his own writing, his own cartoons, and just this melting pot of great cultural synthesizers. An example and a formula I followed myself in all my endeavors in my life, my career, all my magazines, was to have this great swirling salad bowl of ideas and thoughts, and never feel fearful about going on a limb with an opinion if one believed in it,
Mm-hmm.
and reporting that one believed in, no matter how unpopular. That was always the hallmark of the work I did, and definitely I got that from my father. It was the hallmark of the work he did. So he was a visionary in that respect.
Well, what is the role that controversy plays in surfacing ideas in culture?
Stimulant.
Ah,
It's a fantastic stimulant. Controversy is often used to merely titillate. And, I'm not against that either in terms of inspiring a bit of fun and irreverence. I'm always against stimulating untruth, which is why I hate, as you know, we discussed many times, I hate the
yeah.
prominence of algorithms in social media that are really distorting our humanity. But controversy basically means there's a lot of opposing opinions, and you've stepped out on a cultural limb that most people are afraid to stand on. So, by definition, you're already on the edge. And I think that's important. And I think we'd be nowhere without it. I'm sure the very first controversy ever was in the caves when somebody said, we really should get out of these things.
Right. Right.
What are you, crazy? I think that was the first controversy. And, it stimulates discussion change, good and bad, usually good. Ultimately, good wins. It really does. I think that's very important. But, and some controversies are, fake and meant just to stimulate attention. But I
Right.
wasn't counting. I wasn't counting those. I'm more counting genuine exploration at the edges of the culture where people are poking through and saying, hang on, what's in this room?
Hmm. There's controversy that reinforces the algorithm, and there's controversy that breaks or changes the algorithm.
How so? How does it break it?
Well, that's the attention economy, right? Is like there's a sort of version of like controversy that excites, but it's just the kind of stuff that reinforces what people already want. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think about some of the examples that you gave, going all the way back to this idea of, this one person saying, "Hey, we should get out of this cave."
Yeah.
That's calling for a change, right?
Yeah.
That's saying, let's stop with the I'm kind of drawing a parallel between algorithm and culture here, the algorithm of culture. Like let's stop, with the behaviors that we've been coded into, and do something taboo to see if there's something larger, something different.
Yeah. And I want to make a little finer point, if I may. When I'm talking about controversy, or I was not really talking about, except maybe incidentally, controversy on social media. I was talking about real cultural controversy.
Yeah, bigger.
Yeah, because social media is a business. It's worked out that the juice of the business is pissing people off, and so they keep staying there.
Hmm.
It's like Howard Stern. It was a precursor to the algorithm. Howard Stern did a study once, rather, his radio station did a study once, and they found out that people who loved Howard Stern listened on average for 20 minutes a day, and that people who hated him listened on average for 2 hours a day. So that's the origin story for social media right there.
That says a lot. That's
Doesn't it?
good.
So
Okay.
controversy I'm talking about, let's give you an example of the moment, because I just literally finished the next issue of Spin, the print issue, and I wrote my opening editorial called Top Spin, about the 40th anniversary of Live Aid and how we broke the story at the time, and in fact we broke it a year later in 1986, that Live Aid was a complete bust and that the money had been misdirected to the Ethiopian dictator who didn't help the starving people
Hmm.
that he was at war with. Most people
Hmm.
didn't even know that, including Geldof. And that he bought weapons with that money, the Ethiopian dictator Mengistu did, and took control of the war. And 100,000 extra people died in what they were called resettlement marches that were made possible by the amount of money the West funneled through Live Aid and other organizations to Mengistu. And while Geldof was grandstanding and slapping himself on the back for how great he was and soaking up the adulation, the money was literally killing people.
Hmm.
And when we broke that story, we were hated for it. It nearly put Spin out of business. All the record companies pulled their advertising from the next issue, every single one. The entire music industry turned on us, canceled interviews. You can't talk to our people. We think you're horrible. This is terrible. How could you ever besmirch Live Aid, which saved so many lives? And I said, it didn't save lives. Look at the facts. And I went on the offensive and did hundreds and hundreds of interviews. I think about 1,000, to be honest. I literally called up radio stations all over the country. I had a call list with their phone numbers. I called them and said, do you want to interview me? I said, yeah, you're willing to interview you. You're the most hated man in America right now.
It'll give us 2 hours of listening time.
Yeah, but give us some. Nobody gave you 2 hours, actually. It wasn't that hated, I guess. But I told them the story, which they weren't aware of, or they had read in the Spins. Well, I read that, but I didn't believe it. And I didn't believe it. And I said, now you're a news organization. Check it out yourself. I said, my sister broke this story. My sister from college, who's interning with me, went to the library and found this information out. Surely you have people who can go find out in the library. And in those days, before Google, one had to go to a library and look at microfiche of newspapers from around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that, and we found that the European papers, the English papers, and the African papers were reporting on a civil war, which nobody in the West knew about. So obviously the aid issue was being, seen through the prism of a war, that made a whole big difference. It wasn't just a natural humanitarian crisis. So we did break that story. The controversy about that nearly killed us. Eventually, everybody agreed with us in the media. The Wall Street Journal ran a big full-page, well, a full-page, I mean, top-of-the-page editorial saying Spin magazine is right.
Wow.
This is what's happening. And that turned the tide, saved the business because the advertisers did come back. The second and third issue following. And we were solely credited with breaking that story because no one else wanted to put their name to it. Everybody reported Spin says this because they didn't want to say, we're saying this. It was so unpopular. Took courage, dumb courage, I'm guessing in those days. I was very young. It was dumb courage to persist with that. But it took belief that I was aware of. The courage I wasn't aware of. The belief I was aware of. I really believed in the reporting. I knew we were right. I had spoken to some of the sources myself. So that was a controversy of a huge, epic, in fact, global scale. But wow, did it help people because they stopped giving money to Mengistu. Mengistu lost the war. The Ethiopian rebels got Eritrea, which is what they were looking for. And the relief aid organizations took the money and actually really applied them as aid. So that was great. We also did a controversial series on AIDS, what we did for 10 years. It was a column, actually, but in which we were the first and only people to challenge the efficacy of AZT. The whole world. We just accepted it. We said, well, let's ask some other people. You know, we did stories that said it kills you quicker than AIDS. It was a forsaken cancer drug that killed people quicker than cancer. It was on a shelf, but they had decided the drug companies, well, this does kill the cells. Let's have a go at it, and they were giving it to people who felt momentarily better for the first month, but by the second and third month were deteriorating very fast. So this was another fantastic controversy. You know, we were suggesting that the U.S. government agencies and most of the world health agencies were wrong. We, a rock magazine. Somebody asked me in an interview once, they said, well, Bob, let's face it, you're writing these articles, you know, you're publishing these articles, but you're a rock and roll magazine. You know, it's not the Wall Street Journal. And I said to him, well, please remind me, what alphabet does the Wall Street Journal use? So the alphabet. I said, so do we. We use the same alphabet. So it's only about the words. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Check the words. Find the fault in the reporting. By all means, if you find fault in reporting, we'll correct it and admit it. But if the words are right, I don't care where they come from. Do you? And that was something I think people don't realize. They'd prejudiced against us because they thought we were flippant and frivolous. In actual fact, sometimes we very much were flippant and frivolous and irreverent deliberately. But in the cases of our serious reporting, we were very serious. Sorry, long answer.
Great answer. I mean, the dumb courage is interesting to me there because it sounds to me like we're talking about journalism here, but in being a rock and roll magazine, it's almost like you didn't know that you're quote unquote supposed to stay on the sidelines and not get involved in the story.
Yes, you're right. You're right. And I want to say here, I want to give credit to Rolling Stone as the inspiration for Spin, because Rolling Stone also did very serious journalism.
Right.
And it was at the time, this is, they particularly did it in the 70s. They started to sort of soften a bit in the early and mid 80s, which was when we had the opportunity to start Spin. And then it has continued mostly with a great reputation for serious journalism. And I want to just say great work. And it was an inspiration. I've told Wenner this to his face. And, you know, I've always been honest about the fact that Rolling Stone inspired me to do Spin. And I said it as a point on the horizon to reach. We actually, for a while there, did better than them as a business, which was great. But to match that level of sophisticated, smart, culture-shaking journalism, that was what I wanted to do with Spin. You know, people think I was a music fan. Well, I was a music fan like anybody, ordinary. It wasn't a huge music fan. It wasn't really about music for me. It was about telling stories to a generation that was not going to get the real, total truth from mainstream media. Mainstream media was too big a business, had too big a agenda, and was run by too older people. Just as Rolling Stone had told the truth to us when we were teenagers, I want to tell the truth to what became known as Generation X.
Beautiful. Well, let's drop into the questions here. Let's see where they take us. And Let's start with the first question. What is in front of you?
You.
Literally, yeah.
Literally you. You're in front of me. And if I look past you, I see the rest of my dining table. And I realize it's a little, looks like it needs a wipe.
Yeah, reporting the facts.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know if I exactly know what you mean by that. Do you mean in terms of life, career?
Yeah, all of it. It's a direction of hopes and fears. It's
Hmm.
where you sit perhaps on a timeline. It's where your attention is going. It's what you feel you're moving towards, maybe want to move towards. It's what you feel like you're moving away from, want to move away from, right? So what's in front of you is a bit of a question of where are you going? Where are things
Uh,
going? What are the hopes? What are the
well,
fears?
super question, fantastic question. And I knew you didn't mean literally what's in front of me.
But I did. It's part of it.
But I am going to answer that question. This will not come as a surprise, a bit circuitously, rather than directly. I am going to say, to answer the question of what's in front of me, what I hope is in front of me, what I believe is in front of me, and what I want to be in front of me, I have to say, where have I come from? I'm 2 months away from my 70th birthday, which is a milestone. It actually doesn't strike me as portentous or meaningful particularly, but it is a milestone. I've done well to live to 70, I think. And it is a point at which you could look back and say, well, how did I do the first 70 years, you know? And I think I have been always seeking an inner peace, even an outer peace, particularly an outer peace, actually. And I know that a simpler life is a better life. I look at, I found I recently reread a piece I wrote about the Amish, in which I wrote the line, for whatever else you think about them, they live the life they want to live. I have a difficulty, it's hard to manage living half the life I want to live.
Mm.
It was a very true line. And there is a simplicity to the artist, a simplicity to people around me, my neighbors, who are not publishers, and there's a simplicity to people who are monks, and nuns, and priests. And I could very easily, if I go in a time machine, I might come out a monk. I could easily have gravitated to that. But I have come to the recognition that I am cursed by ambition. Now, by ambition, I mean creative ambition. I don't necessarily mean I must have jets, I must have yachts. I don't want those things. I'll never get them.
Sure.
I doubt it. If I had the money, I wouldn't spend it on that.
That impulse to get involved, it seems.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because there was a point where it came obvious to me that I was very driven to be the mouthpiece, if there wasn't one, for a certain truth. And either as a writer or an editor or a publisher. And so I cannot have a simple life, is what I'm saying. And that's a regret in one respect. I know that would have been a more fun, wonderful, healthier life. But the gifts I believe I was given are creative gifts. And so as a result, I am driven to do more and more. I'm insatiable. I was going to say unsatiable. That's not a word. Insatiable in that quest or that addiction, you can call it too. A quest sounds too noble. Addiction sounds about right. I'm trying very hard not to make the curse of ambition sound, noble or special. It is just what it is. I'm not the only writer in the world or editor who wakes up and feels, well, I didn't do enough yesterday. I better go do it some more today. But I am eternally and enjoyably curious. We've worked together on a project recently. Mm-hmm. And I'm eternally curious. A lot of people say that. I am enjoyably curious. I have not heard that said a lot. It is like, sometimes it's like pressing on a toothache, that sort of weird pleasure in that pain in a toothache. And sometimes it's like just another pleasure point. It's a real, desire to touch that pleasure point of curiosity. And the ambition I don't have is to be famous. I was briefly for a while quite famous with spin. It wasn't enjoyable per se. I didn't see much gain out of it. Better tables at restaurants, maybe. But I'm not ambitious for great wealth. Small wealth, I am ambitious for, but not great wealth. And, no, seriously, financial security would be great, but not the need to be a billionaire. And I'm not driven for, immortality. I don't care what people say when I'm dead, because I won't be around to know. I'll be on another plane, I imagine, and it won't matter. So that's it. So it's really this sort of, I don't know, it's like a virus that never goes away. So,
Do you find your curiosity points more forward or more backward? Or does it depend on the day?
always forward.
Yeah.
No, it's not true. I'm very, very intrigued by things that have gone by. So I'd say it would be, 360 degrees. I'm curious about things that have happened. I'm curious about stories people tell me. I'm curious about where things go. If you tell me a story, I think of an angle to that story, and I'm curious to see what that would go. Where will that, if I unspool that thread, where will it take me? And that's it. So that's a great question. Is it forward or backwards? I think it's forward in that I keep going forwards because of that. I've said to many people, I will die working. That's not because I'm a workaholic. It's because I imagine I will be stimulated by work. And I've seen too many people who retire and do nothing. They sit in their chair and go, what am I going to do today? And, it's not the dream world they thought it would be. I think it's a joy to always work. I love the stories of the writers like Beckett who died writing that morning. They wrote the day they died, And I think that's great. I think, life is so finite and short, that you will never have the chance to finish everything you want to finish.
If somebody's listening and they're looking to find their curiosity, let's say they want to be a writer or, a creative of any type, but the key is they're looking to find that curiosity. What advice would you give on helping people to recognize what is a good story worth following their curiosity on?
Oh, wow. What a fascinating question. Which I've never contemplated. So give me a moment to articulate.
Okay.
I think, first of all, my advice would be, from experience, the thing that invariably holds a person back and can ruin a life is fear. So don't be fearful. Because be fearful of bears. You know what I mean?
Bears?
Yeah. Be fearful of people with guns.
Yeah.
Be fearful of walking down a bad street in a bad neighborhood in the middle of the night.
Right. Functional fears.
Yes, functional fears is well put. But don't fear, first of all, don't fear failure, because you will ultimately fail. We all fail. We fail to stay alive. So we all fail in the end. But don't ever fear failure. Failure is usually the quickest route to getting somewhere. And I think if you're curious, and you probably would be curious if you wanted the advice in the first place, then go with it, trust it. Use the force. Use the force, Luke. It is your force. Curiosity is our force. I think it's curiosity that compels and sustains the human species. What else can it be? We've always said that it's mystery that fuels life. It's not answers. If we had all the answers, we'd dry up and die. What could we do?
Sure.
If we do nothing, if we had all the answers.
Sure.
On this plane, I believe in higher planes and life after death, such as that may be. And I believe that's where we have all the answers. That's where we can probably handle them. But we couldn't handle it now. Mystery compels us. So therefore, curiosity compels us. And my advice would be simple, which is always just follow your instincts. If you're curious about something, follow it. Write about it. Don't be afraid. I've never met a good writer who's afraid.
Great line.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever met a person who was fearful that was a writer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to do it. You have to do it.
So in taking the circuitous route, you've covered nicely off on the opposite end here of the what's behind you question. So I feel like we're good on that, but we're touching on this other axis of questions, which is what do you receive and what do you give? And that has a lot to do with this curiosity discussion that we're having right now. But let's go into the finer points on it. Like, what's your what's your media digest? What are your inputs? Like, what are you taking in to feed that curiosity? And then what kind of pursuits does that result in? Like, what are the inputs and the outputs of Bob Guccione Jr.?
Well, again, such a large and wonderful question. Um, I I guess I absorb almost everything I see in front of me. Let me just be clear right here. I'm a very lazy person. I'm a very, very extraordinarily lazy person,
What
proudly.
yields creativity? How can I use my creativity to be lazy?
Exactly. That's my greatest pursuit in life. How can I be more lazy and still actually afford to pay the bills?
The ambition to be lazy.
The ambition is that's my highest ambition, my highest
Yeah,
aspiration, to be lazier. I'm already lazy.
right.
So so I'm not one of the people who gets up at 6 in the morning to read all the papers, watch the news shows, exercise for an hour, have breakfast, and still be at work by, somehow 7. No, I read whatever's in front of me. I mean, I read regularly BBC, the New York Times, irregularly the Times, actually, because I don't subscribe, but I read a lot of links that are sent to me. So I wouldn't put that up as high as The Guardian I read. I don't like necessarily all the Guardian's politics. I think they're a bit wimpy. A lot of their social reporting is very, very, playing to the galleries, not particularly good or truthful. I read what I'm sent. A lot of things come just from things I'm sent. I read trade papers and know more about the media business. And I read research articles of things that we would be working on, either at Wanderlust, which is my travel site, which is my main passion, or things for Spin that I'm consulting. I'd sold the magazine in 1997, but I happen to be consulting the new owner, who I like immensely, Jimmy Hutchinson. And so I wind up having a lot of things to read in pursuit of things we're writing, or just things get sent to me, or people send me things to read. I consume a lot less television than I used to, because I find the news to be mostly just so polarized as to be useless.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Instagram a lot, but I do something that I'm sure a lot of people do, which is that, it has worked out who I am. I'm a liberal, 69-year-old heterosexual male, white,
Mm-hmm.
and it sends me all the stuff it expects I like. But I don't get the other side. So what I do is I search for J.D. Vance, who I
Smart.
hate.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stand him. I think he's a pig. But I do search for him. And then I get all of that side comes flooding because I like it. I guess I'm going to go like. And
And so
within a
you
few
do
days,
it to see how it affects the algorithm. So you're kind of playing with the
oh,
fluidity of the feed.
right. I'm playing with the fluidity of feed. I know how to fix the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like putting a coin in a drinks machine. Instead of taking Pepsi out, you take out Sprite. So then you get Sprite. But I want to see what the other side is saying.
Yeah.
I don't just want my side mocking how stupid and inarticulate Trump is. I got that already. I know it. I know him. I knew him for 20 years. Never liked the guy, and always thought he was a bit slow and stupid and deviant. But anyway, I don't need to be told that by Instagram. As amusing as some of those things are, I want to know what the other side is saying. I want to know. I want to find out what their appeal is, and I think I have. I think the appeal of Trump, like the appeal of many right-wing people, like Milosevic in Serbia, it's a better example perhaps than a lot of people have used. It is your fill in the blank, i.e., uneducated white people, greatly. Your era of dominance is coming to an end, because statistically we are going to be overwhelmed by people who are not you. We're going to be overwhelmed particularly and especially by minorities who are no longer minorities. And so people who are not white, rural, uneducated are no longer going to have preference that you've had for generations, in fact, going back to the existence of your lineage, probably. And so as that market realizes the dilapidation of their dominance and preference, and being preferred rather, they struggle and grasp and scratch and claw at what they perceive to be the enemy, which is, by the way, themselves, their own, lack of intelligence and lack of education and lack of effort they apply. But they claw at the people who have, by all of the opposite, like all of the effort, all of the dedication, all of the learning and intelligence, and the difficult road they've had to hoe to get here, they claw at those people. And Trump's appeal was that he said, "You're right, they're the enemy. I'll help you defeat them." That's the appeal. It's the end of the sun setting on white dominance. We're not white superiority. That's a whole different thing. White dominance, and we're going to have to digest that as a culture. We're going to have to go through years. It's going to be painful, and we will go through it. I believe we'll succeed, but we have to go through it now. And so that's what I learned from seeing the other stuff. That's the inputs I get. I'm not sure how to answer the outputs. The outputs is my work. The things I write, the things I say, this podcast, and I don't know if it's very significant, my output. It's very well-intentioned, and I do put effort into it, but how significant it is, I don't know. And it's not significant against the wave, this torrent of anger and hatred in America. But that's the answer.
So when you've done that investigation of what the other side is thinking or how they're saying what they think, question that comes up for me. This is a hard one to conjure up. So the question is, can you think of some moments where you were surprised or you changed your mind on something? And if it's hard to conjure up one of those moments, how does it feel when those moments happen? When you find that you have a view on something, you go through the investigative process of what the counterpoint might be, and then feel a shift in your opinion?
Wow. I mean, each one of these interviews could be an hour long. Each one of these questions. I'm choking, not on the question, but on water I just drank. You haven't told me.
Is that what it feels like?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it feels like. It does. It does. It does feel like choking. It's a great question. And again, I don't want to give the impression that I'm this studious, person out there investigating everything left and right. I am, because I'm lazy, dealing with what I find, what comes to me. Now, a lot comes to me, and I find a lot. Okay, that's true. So I am reacting to what I see and perceive. And I have, of course, over the years, changed my mind about a lot of things. And generally, I will say that I have softened. I don't have as many hard line opinions and hard line beliefs. I have some. I believe in God. I believe in truth. I believe in courage. And I believe in love. But those are hard truths, of course, the core primal truths. But there are people whose lifestyles are not my lifestyle. And in the beginning, I didn't understand alternative lifestyles. Didn't understand them. I wasn't against them. They didn't understand them. They had no interest to me. But then I realized, well, I could not want those lifestyles. But to the person who is experiencing that lifestyle, it is their life. Just as my life is my life. I'm an Italian American, loves good Italian food, loves wine. Is probably not smart enough about how much bad stuff I eat, but that's my life, and I have my beliefs, as we've been talking about on this show. So I thought, well, the things I don't understand, nonetheless, are wholly the life experience of those people. And since one of the things I most absolutely, totally believe is that all people are equal, it comes from my Catholicism, essentially, but also from everything else in my life, then obviously the life they lead is as important as anything I'll do, So I may not understand it. I mean, the ethnicities, I don't understand their conduct, but it is their conduct. They might or might not understand mine. Probably they're going to be more patient with me than I am with them. So I think I learned patience over the time. I don't think I've had one moment where I said, oh my God, I was completely wrong about that. I must now repent and recant and retrace my steps. No, I think I've shifted positions always towards tolerance. I'm very happy about that.
Mm.
And I've had people push me, including mostly my partner, Liza Lentini, who I've been with now for 22 years, has been the greatest influence in my life. My father was a great influence. She's actually a greater influence. And partly because, well, she tells me this, she's smarter than me, but I think she is. That helps. You know, she has shown me ways of looking at things and not to be so quick to judge. So that's how I think I've changed positions. I've been more patient and tried to be more understanding. The one thing I think in the very beginning of Spin, when I was one of the people very publicly defending rock lyrics against the Senate wives, as they were known, the PMRC, that was the name of the organization, trying to get lyrics banned and rock songs banned and people prosecuted under the obscenity law, which is criminal, not civil. I was one of the people, the only person in the rock media, actually, who was opposing these people, debating them, arguing against them, editorializing against them. And, you know, the real sort of lightning rod of that movement was the Christian right. It was what was behind the senators' wives, Gore and Baker particularly. And it was galvanizing a horror and a revulsion for liberalism and for art in general across America. And I thought they were the enemy. They were the enemy as clearly as I think, you know, the Taliban are the enemy or Al-Qaeda are the enemy. But I went on a couple of Christian radio shows and some Christian television shows. And I was actually became a regular in the 700 Club. They called me the House Liberal there. And I debated these people and debated them. And although I think many of their arguments were fearful, you know, this was not what they were told in the Bible, so therefore it had to be wrong. And a lot of their arguments were, you know, very constricted. I thought, I've yet to meet one person. I met Swaggart, but Swaggart aside, I've yet to meet one of these people who doesn't genuinely believe this and who genuinely just wants the world to be better. I had not thought of that. We disagreed completely about something as abstract as music and literature. But in actual fact, fundamentally, they just wanted the world to be better. They wanted a nice world for their kids and their families. And so I softened towards them. And at one point, my father said to me, "Why are you going on these Christian shows? You're only giving them credibility." And I said, "Are you kidding me? They've got God. They've got all the credibility in the world. There's nothing I'm bringing to that table." I says, "But they're also never going to hear from anybody like me unless they go on those shows."
Yeah.
What's the point of going on MTV again and saying, "Yeah, rock lyrics must never be censored"? Everybody agrees with that. So let me go on these Christian radio shows, which were massive. They were as big as Howard Stern's audience.
Yeah.
Fantastically large and national audiences. And I would talk to the callers in, who would say, "Well, I think you're wrong. You're going to go to hell. I'll pray for your soul. But you do make some good points." Literally, I'd hear that. And I'd go, "Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's great." And, you know, they quote the Bible. And I would say, "Well, I also read the Bible and Catholic. And, you know, I believe the same things you believe. We just disagree socially. But fundamentally, we're on the same page." And so that was a case where I learned that I was wrong to be so judgmental or so stridently judgmental. Every time I've been stridently judgmental, I've usually come from that position and realized I was too strident, but not necessarily completely wrong.
Well, you've once again elegantly rounded the corner into the next directions. So our axis here is about the light in the soil, right? So the questions are, what shines upon you and what do you rest upon? And yeah, I mean, what do you see in the heavens and what do you see in the earth? What is, you know, the hard ground of reality? And then on the other side, what do you believe? And how do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I see on the hard ground all of us as imperfect, not finished yet, unfinished, wood that has not been polished, people who are effectively all of us children of a greater knowledge and a greater power and a greater future, none of which we can understand. If you walk past a child's playground in a city, I say that in the city because it's small. The space is small. There's a tiny little space, and all these little kids are in there. And in that tiny little space, these tiny little people are living out the entirety of their universe. And they're, crying at each other, playing with each other, punching each other, delighted to be with each other, not happy to be there. All of those things. And you look at that and you go, oh, that's so sweet, but none of it matters. It's just an hour in the playground and you're learning that there are other people in the world and there's big noises in the city.
Right.
And we smile at them. Well, I think that's us. There's all of humanity in that little playground. Happy to be there, not happy to be there. Crying, struggling, fighting, developing little 3-year-old crushes on somebody, wanting to play with the puppy that's running around. That's us as humans. That's us as a species. That's us at our most sophisticated.
Yeah.
That's us. And the next plane, whatever it is, and I said I'm a Catholic, as you know, but I don't believe that God is only Catholic. I don't think God only has 20% of the market share. I think God is God. And don't think God's a man in white robes. I don't think he's a woman in white robes. I think he's truly gender neutral. And, it is the divinity that is beyond us. So that's how I look at it. Some people say I like to think of this universe. Well, the universe is pretty fucking empty. Well, it's cold and empty, most of it. So I don't know if that's the ideal. But, whatever you say, it doesn't matter. If you recognize your own smallness in the scheme of things, I think you're halfway there. So that's the ground. Now, the heavens is the mystery. It's the unknown. It's the unknowable. The universe is not unknowable. We're going to know a little bit about it. Many, many generations further, we'll know more about it, and we'll only know physically that we live in a physical plane. We can only know that which is physical. I don't think we are able to possibly understand what's in the heavens, using it metaphorically as you have, as opposed to being the sky. I think that we need to just relax about that. If we were meant to know, we'd know. Does the Virgin Mary appear? That's a great question, right? And we're doing an article at Wanderlust, which is the Virgin Mary tour. We're actually putting together a possible itinerary to tour all the places she's appeared. We're not going to sell the itinerary. I mean, it's just itinerary. And telling you about each place and where you can stay if you go there. But did she really appear? I don't know. To the people she appeared to, they believe it completely. I was in Medjugorje, where it is absolutely believed she appeared. And of course, we know about Lourdes and, other places. But did she appear? Did hallucination? Well, we don't know, and I don't even know if it matters. I was when I owned Discover magazine for a while, a few years I owned it. I was at a science dinner, and a bunch of people were trying to show how clever they were to the guest of honor, who was an Austrian physicist who had won the Nobel Prize. And I forget his name in a moment, forgive me, but they were all trying to show off to him about how they didn't believe in religion, how stupid it was, supernatural. And I said, well, I believe, totally. I mean, I can't even imagine it's a question. This is it? You think this is it? Of course, this is only part of the way. And they went, oh, Bob, surely you don't believe the supernatural stuff. I said, well, there wouldn't be faith if I didn't believe the supernatural stuff, would it?
Right.
Of course they believe it. Absolutely. That's fundamental. I said, but what does it matter? Does it really matter if Jesus turned water into wine or he raised the dead? None of that matters. The dead guy he raised died anyway later on. The wine got drunk. What does it matter? It's the principles. It's the philosophy. It's the idea of surrendering to faith, which relieves us of a huge stress of trying to have all the answers. Whereupon the Austrian physicist said, I totally believe with Bob. I'm sorry, I shouldn't try the accent. I'm sure that was quasi Schwarzenegger. But what he said was, I totally agree with Bob. I'm also a believer. And that killed the whole table.
And it was the physicist, the authority of the math coming in. Right.
And he said, no, of course, Bob's right. It's only part of what we're about.
Yeah.
And so I say I believe in God. I don't, as I say, believe necessarily in the, iconography that we come up with. But I believe in the divinity, and I believe in the hope of being part of something that is just pure love. unadulterated love. I think that's what we go to. I think we are welcome into love. The philosophical questions that are difficult are, what do you do with a Hitler? You know?
Yeah.
What do you do with a Donald Trump? Awful person, terrible racist. People are dying because of him. What do you do with that guy? Does he go to heaven too? Along with not Saint Francis, I think he will be Saint Francis, but Pope Francis. Do they both go in the same lane? That's a hard question. But again, I have to say, go back to what I said earlier, impossible to answer. Therefore, by surrendering to faith, I don't have to necessarily answer it,
Gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
What's in your heart?
Plaque. Probably some calcium. Definitely some prosciutto. I went to my doctor once, and I was about 50 years old, in superb health. And he said, well, we got your results back. He says, we can't use them because they show you as dead. You are dead by these results because you have so much fat, animal fat. I did eat about half a pound of prosciutto the night before. So he said, well, don't do that again. That's not very good for you. So, but what's in my heart? Okay, I know you didn't mean plaque and calcium.
Well, I didn't not mean it.
Yeah. I'm afraid it's probably there's some there. I probably should be more mindful of that. In my heart is a desire to be a better person, for sure, a better person than I am, to be worthy of the absolute love I believe I receive from God. I also think nobody is ever fully worthy in the definition we would have, but that to God we're worthy. But still, it's incumbent upon us to be better people. I am not going to, sell all my possessions and go live among the poor, because I don't think actually that would work very successfully for me or for anybody else. In my heart is a lot of love. A lot of it's not been used. It's definitely a great reservoir of love that should have come out before. There were many cases where it was needed and wasn't used. That's a regret. I am deeply loved, which is wonderful. Best thing in my life is that. I cannot tell you how wonderful and wonderful that is, and how grateful I am for that. But in my heart, basically, is this desire to be a better person. And also, I feel that swirling spirit includes a faith that I'm doing many of the right things I should be doing with my life, and therefore to keep doing them. Some of them are frivolous. Is wanderlust going to change the world? Well, maybe, maybe some things on it will change the way people look at the world. But it's a good thing, because in doing wanderlust, the travel site I do, I try to find the humanity everywhere. We have a saying on the staff, which is people first, building second. We're a travel site that's dedicated to finding out really who the people are. And the buildings are great, by the way, usually, and we say that. But first, let's try and find the humanity in a piece,
Yeah.
And so I'm happy with that, and I believe in my heart there's enough fuel to keep going for a long time, to keep doing that kind of work, and to always strive to be authentic and honest, which I fail to do always, if I'm going to be honest, therefore succeeding a little more in that category. But I try to. I honestly do try. And, I prize laziness, so I can't say I desire to be less lazy. But perhaps I should be less indifferent to struggles of other people that I encounter, and help more there in some way, I don't know what. But certainly I should never be indifferent to my gifts, if that makes sense.
It does.
That I'm in control of. I'm not necessarily always in control of when I'm different to other people. I don't always know other people's problems. I have learned to know that other people have problems they don't know about. That's been an evolution. But I can control being indifferent to my gifts. So that's what's in my heart. So my heart is a struggle, a wonderful, wonderful struggle of, trying to analyze all the data it takes in, and, come up with a report that says, we can do better here, Bob.
Hmm.
Let's do better.
That's lovely. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I don't think there's much left to add. Your questions are great. I mean, they're right on. I didn't, you sent me questions. I didn't look at them. I mean, I saw the list, not thinking about that. But I like to respond to the question live and organically. So I didn't realize how good these questions were until you asked them. They really, really do drive out answers that I think are very honest and reflective. And look, I think when we're younger, we don't think much of our own value. We can be very egotistical, we can be very arrogant. We don't think much of our own value. I think as we get older, we start to really think about our value. And our value may not necessarily be wide for other people, but to ourselves. And if you believe, like I do, that we all go to a higher plane of enlightenment and great love, then we can oscillate a little on the earth. I helped today, I didn't help today, But I do think it's important at any age to recognize you have tremendous value and to be, as cliche as this is, and I hope this is the only cliche I've used the entire time here, but it is important to be kind to yourself. And that has taken me decades to learn. I've always been very, very rough on myself. And so I think I'd only add that, that it's important to realize you have value, appreciate that you have value, and relish manifestations of that value.
Wise words. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Will. Thanks a lot.